Hi, welcome to Wildcard FPL, your home for FPL content, and it's the end of game week 2. We're going to go through who's injured, who's off penalties, and who's a good buy for the upcoming game week. But first, we're going to go through our scores, what happened, and the bad news with the good news. So, Steve, we'll kick it off with you. What happened this game week? What was your score?
Well, there was no good news. I think that's the first thing to say. There's absolutely no good news for my team. Estepinian scored 11 points, but literally everybody in the game has Estepinian, so it doesn't really matter. That is the end of the good news. Because I scored 34 points. That's 10 points under the average. On the screen, you can see things. Maybe you can see my game week rank at 7.3 million. All of that is bad. This team is bad. I don't like anyone in this team. Eze, I've had from the start, the AI bots all telling you that he's going to do something. He doesn't do anything at all. Palace are a really, really good defensive team. Really good. So getting defenders and goalkeepers, whatever. Eze, as an attacker in that team, pretty much unemployed. Joao Pedro randomly was dropped and he scored no points. He came on, though, and helpfully got a yellow card. So turning that 1 point, which would have maybe been 100,000 places. He turned that 1 point into a 0. Bruno moaned his way to a yellow card, also reducing himself down to 1 point. Saka was randomly shunted off of pens by Ødegaard. No one saw that coming. Martinelli was trash. Chilwell, Chelsea were trash. Everything was bad. There are no shining lights in my team. I still have Gabriel because I wasn't able to get rid of him in game week 1. Arteta seems to want to play literally anybody else. It took someone's leg to fall off and for somebody else to get a red card before he was just like, fine, I'll bring you on. It was unbelievable. And so, yeah, anyone holding Gabriel was a surprise even to see him not starting that game. Henry, really good, actually. Not that he's actually a little bit of a differential, but that probably saved me from having an atrocious week. But it was still pretty bad. I've dropped into the 3 millions. Overall, I spent most of the game week crying into my phone, hoping something was going to happen. Nothing happened.
It's looking like a bit of bad luck for you there, Steve. I mean, my team, similar sort of vein. Fortunately for me, I had Matoma on my side, which got me an extra 12 points. Ended up with 47, only slightly over average, but I took a big red arrow this week. Same midfield as you. I had a lot of 1 and 2 points in there. Jackson from Chelsea did absolutely nothing again. Chilwell, nothing at all. Bad move choosing Turner in the end. Would have been fine to leave Steele on for the extra 1 point for the saves. But yeah, it was not a particularly good week. Seems like lots of managers with good looking teams have come away with basically nothing. I think that's just the way of FPL sometimes. 47 points and not much else to say. Fred, what about you? How did you get on this week?
All in 56 points. I feel okay-ish about it, considering there were some pretty horrible scores out there. There's someone I heard on a show earlier today that got 17 points, and this guy takes it quite seriously. Like, his team looks awesome on paper, but he just got absolutely killed. So some really bad points out there, I think. But from my perspective, Estepinian 11, Chilwell didn't do much, and then in midfield, yeah, Bruno got his yellow, got 1 point, not great. Rashford 2, not great. Martinelli, not great. And Bomo, I have a 16 pointer, which is great. Saka 3 points, disappointing on that front. Again, Ødegaard taking the pen was a bit of a surprise. Ollie Watkins has got 10 points over 2 game weeks. I will take that, but I was expecting a bit more from him. And then Haaland, captain, 4 points, which is disappointing. I have Henry on the bench with 5. I'm probably just going to start playing him. All in, 56 points. Could be better, could be worse.
Okay, and now we move on to Jon, the shining light in the Wildcard FPL team this week. Tell us what happened, Jon, and how did you get to this monstrous score?
Yeah, thrilling. I was on a ferry in the middle of the ocean, desperately trying to get updates on the games throughout the weekend. Yeah, pretty pleased. Glad that I made the move for Mbeumo, which everyone seems to have done. So I think Estepinian and Mbeumo were pretty popular players to have, but got a big haul. And then Wissa, I guess, is my differential. Got 11 points, which is pretty handy. I was umming and ahhing about not captaining Haaland, but I think in reality I would have only gone for Saka, so that wouldn't have been much of a difference. Foden, Alvarez and Saliba I've had since game week 1. I liked Saliba even as a Spurs fan last season before he got injured, and I think their expected points are a little bit closer than people think, and maybe some of the season-long stats have been skewed by Saliba's injury. So happy got him in there. Foden and Alvarez, I just think they're kind of the same size and the same sort of player, and I thought they would link up, and so I've had them since game week 1. good returns. They should have scored a couple in game week 1, linked up to score this week. And then Man United players, less said about them the better. I had them in really because as a Spurs fan, I thought if Spurs get drubbed, at least I'll get some FPL points. Shaw 1, Rashford 2, and Saka. Yeah, Saka not taking the pen. Again, bit of a punch in the gut. But 2 or 3 players letting me down. Expecting to get up into the 80s or 90s at one point. All in, pretty good. 75, 62,000 rank for the game week.
Finishing up as 161,000 overall as well, so a bit of a banger there. Okay, so we learned some interesting stuff in game week 2 revolving around penalties. Jackson didn't take the penalty for Chelsea this week. Saka handed the ball to Odegaard for Arsenal, and Watkins didn't take the penalty for Villa. Instead, Douglas Luiz took it instead. So there's some things to think about in the penalty department. Are these expensive players worth having, worth maintaining? Maddison and Baldock have both been yellow Dorito'd this week. There's been a lot of plans for Maddison to come into the team for a lot of managers, and Baldock is a lot of people's benchman in the 4.5 million department. McAllister from Liverpool got a red card and was out until 24th of September, but that has already been overturned. Tomiyasu from Arsenal, Aguerd, Nunez, Ream have all got red cards and are out until the beginning of September. And we've got to talk about Joao Pedro, Gabriel, Foden and Alvarez. Are they minutes risks in the upcoming weeks? Let's get into it. What do we think about the penalty takers? Obviously, Jackson and Saka are both very well selected at the moment, and Watkins is high on a lot of managers' prospects. Are they no longer prospects now they're off penalties, or are other options more appealing?
FPL managers spend a really long time researching who's on penalties because it's such a big part of the game. If you have a penalty taker in your team, you make decisions based off of who is the penalty taker, especially when you've got 2 players who are really similar, and you make that decision to go, I want him because he's on penalties, I want him because he's on penalties. Set pieces are really big, getting in James Ward-Prowse, maybe someone who comes back into this, just having that person who takes all the corners, all the free kicks, and if you have a penalty taker in your team as well, can really give you an edge over players who don't maybe look into that much detail of the game. So having Saka not take a penalty, Watkins not take a penalty too, suddenly those players become way less valuable. They're expensive. And if they're not turning in regular returns in other areas, they become really expensive to have in your team to not even be on penalties anymore. Jackson, for example, may be one that comes into penalties because Enzo, I understand, he took a penalty he missed. So yeah, Joao Pedro wasn't even on the pitch for most of that game, so he was their penalty taker. But what happens when he's not taking penalties because he's not on the pitch? Is that a Matoma? Is that a March? So yeah, FPL managers, like I said, they take a long time researching who's on penalties because it actually is a really key feature of the game. And like I say, a lot of casuals will not look at that and go, I'm going to have that person. They focus more on like the big names. So sometimes having an Mbeumo, for example, is fantastic because his returns have mainly been penalties.
Yeah, Fred, you've got Watkins up front. What are you thinking going forward? Are you going to maintain Watkins or are you thinking something else? I'm
looking at Jackson. I think he looks like a good asset for the next couple of game weeks. So he's cost £7 million, right? Watkins costs 8. Watkins has got 10 points over 2 games. Jackson has 2 points over 2 games. So I think in that respect, I actually feel okay about Ollie Watkins at this current moment. He has Burnley next. In another world, I might be thinking I need more from this guy, but as things stand, I'm okay with Ollie Watkins. Having said that, it would be great if he took the pen on the weekend. So to Steve's point, I totally agree. It does add risk. Now that Saka doesn't take pens, I'm actually thinking about taking him out. I think that's a valid option. So it does change things and it's something we all need to keep an eye on. Is Saka to Odegaard the choice move now? The problem is that we don't know because Arteta said that statement where he's like, that was completely unscripted. They just decided on the pitch, right? So it's tough. I think it's about getting a balance. But yeah, Mbeumo's been terrific and that's down to pens mostly.
Maddison is another key player that people are all looking at right now for Spurs, especially while Spurs are coming into a slightly decent run of fixtures. I know he's a target for me this week coming up. John, have you got any news from the Spurs camp about Maddison, about how bad this injury is, or are you still thinking about Maddison in the weeks coming up?
Yeah, plugged in. No, I think just the Spurs in the know accounts on Twitter are saying that it's MCL.
That's your medial ligament. Yeah. So that normally is about 4 weeks out.
Yeah,
it totally depends, right? So ligament. So you can do your medial ligament and be back in a week, 2 weeks. If you think about Kira Walsh during the World Cup, she done something to her knee in the and had to come off in a game. She missed one game and she was back within a week.
Yeah.
Even if you do it quite badly, I think it's only about 4 to 6 weeks. Is he down to play in a week?
People are saying he's going to go.
Yeah, so I was reading this thing earlier where it said that it was a minor MCL strain. I think that's not too much of a big deal. Like, he should recover quite quickly. But I think he's probably a doubt for this weekend. So perhaps in a week, 2 weeks, we can start thinking about Maddison again. But for now, it seems super risky to bring him in.
And then the other worries that we've seen this week, Joao Pedro, obviously for Brighton, only got a partial game. He didn't bring back much from those minutes, but I think the big news was that he didn't get started at all. And Gabriel from Arsenal is still not playing. Are those two players that we want to be looking at dropping or benching going forward?
Speaking personally, because I have both of them, Joao Pedro, or Johnny Peter as I call him, I think he's got to go from my team now. I'm way, way, way behind. I can't afford to be carrying anyone. De Zerbi seems like he's up for a better rotation. And guess what, De Zerbi? I'm not. So I'm out. So I think Joao Pedro will be someone who, I think he'll probably, he may even start against West Ham. He might do stuff against West Ham. But I just cannot take a risk and have him in that team. So Gabriel from Arsenal, look, I was all up for selling him. I've got 2 free transfers this week, 2.5 million in the bank. I can do pretty much anything I want. I've got enough money in the bank. I've got 2 free transfers. And I was going to take a -4 and get rid of 3 people, including Gabriel. Having seen what happened at Arsenal, I now feel I want to hold on to him because I think so many people have already got rid of him. Me personally, I think it's worth me hanging on to him and doing a bit of a Hail Mary and hoping that he plays because he is a much bigger goal threat than anyone else in the back four. If he plays against Fulham, there's every chance that not only could he get a clean sheet, he could score a goal. And when he came on against Palace, what I really liked is that he looked really aggressive and pumped up. He really wanted to win for his team. He wanted that clean sheet and he was throwing himself in the way of stuff. He was cheering on his teammates. All of that stuff says to me that this is not a player who's about to leave the club. This is a player who wants to fight for his place. And if Arteta saw that, and he would have done, I'm pretty convinced that he will have to start him against Fulham. And I think if he does start against Fulham, there's every chance that he can score a goal.
So for the managers who have Joao Pedro or Gabriel, what are the options that they can look at this week? Should they be following Jon's footsteps and looking at Wissa, or following Jon's footsteps and looking at Alvarez? What's the best option up front?
We're still subject to Pep Roulette, I'm sure, but Man City won't have anyone in by this weekend. Certainly won't have trained with the team in that midfield. I think it's working pretty well. I'm pretty sure Alvarez is going to play again. Wissa, I don't know. I mean, Brentford look really good. I personally would go for Alvarez. I think he's going to play.
What about Silva?
You think Silva's going to come in at the weekend? I think Foden and Alvarez have just looked really good. I think it's like an exciting new partnership for Man City.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, isn't it? Like, I know what you're saying. Foden, I think, had something like 11 chances created on that game on the weekend, which is absolutely mad. He was awesome, like one of the best performances I've seen for a while in the Premier League. I think Foden's more nailed than Alvarez. I think it's hard to say. Like, Silva can play in a lot of different positions.
For the managers who don't have Watkins or Jackson, would you recommend they get one of those in? Is Jackson the best way into the Chelsea lineup for their easy games, or would you recommend somebody else at Chelsea?
Yeah, it's a good question. I keep seeing people wanting to get Jackson in, and then I saw a tweet today saying, why is everyone hyping Jackson? I don't get it. That was just from a random, and I was like, this is a really good point.
Yeah.
Totally. His XP is fantastic. His XG is fantastic. I think that he is about to start slapping. That would be my take. He seems to be getting into really good positions. He looks really good. I know that he's had a 1-pointer and a 1-pointer, right? But when you watch him play, he looks fantastic. Like, he's a really good number 9. So I just think it's a matter of time. It could go either way. That's the issue, and that's FPL.
The problem that scares me about Chelsea is you can go, Jackson looked good, Chilwell looked good, Mudryk had a spell when he came in and was like, oh wow, that kid's rapid. He's done nothing. It's one of those things where you could go, I'll get Chilwell and Jackson in. They feel like the potential's there and Poch will get them together and they'll start returning. Or you just look completely stupid and Chelsea just still
you've waited to transfer.
They had a horrible season last season and it just continues with this mad £1 billion experiment they're doing to finish mid-table.
The difficulty is, in terms of the fixtures, when I look at what the bot says, for attack, for Gameweek 3, 3 to 6, Chelsea are top of that pile. They are the highest ranked team according to the bot when it comes to attack because they have Luton at home and Nottingham Forest at home. Those are probably the two best fixtures you'll have in the league this season, and they are one after the other. To me, it feels like you have to have a Chelsea attacking asset in your side for these next 2 game weeks.
Unfortunately, Steve, we have one. Ben Mother flipping Chilwell.
I think there's also clean sheets up for grabs. I think Chilwell, if you haven't got Chilwell already,
Get Chilwell.
You need
100%.
to stop what you're doing right now. Go open the phone app and get Chilwell immediately.
And he's now, what is it? Is he 5.1 now? Or is it 5.6? I can't quite remember.
5.6.
5.6, right.
Yeah.
So people who have no cash left in the bank, they can no longer get Ben Chilwell. So if you have cash in the bank, to Steve's point, go and get your phone and get Ben Chilwell. Yeah.
I do have cash in the bank thanks to our first podcast where Steve advised us to leave a bit of cash in the bank.
There we go.
So
yeah,
I'm definitely going to do it. Yeah, Jack. I think I have to go to Jackson. Look, I'm miles behind.
Are you doing Jackson? You can do it.
I think I have to. I think I have to do Pedro to Jackson. I think I have to. The next 2 games for them, he will score goals. And part of the fun of FPL is not looking at last week because those points are all in the past. They're gone. You know, we can't get Mbeumo's points again. I can't transfer him in. I can't get March in and have 15 points on the table. They're gone. So part of FPL is thinking who is going to be the next person who's going to get those big hauls. And I'm not sure that there's going to be that many people looking at a 2 points in 180 minutes and going, that's the one for me. But speaking as somebody who just finished 7 point something million in the game week, I have to do Pedro to Jackson. I've got the money, I can afford it. I've got 2 free transfers, I can afford it from a transfer perspective too.
I can confirm that a lot of people are doing that move. Like, it's all over Twitter, it's all over YouTube. Like, everyone is going to Jackson this week.
Yeah, I mean, the Chelsea run is too appealing, isn't it? It's too appealing not to, and you get the double threat of Chilwell basically being a winger as a defender.
I'm so tempted to do Watkins to Jackson. Yeah, so I think that there are quite a few things that I want to do. Obviously, I have a midfield of Martinelli, Saka, Bruno and Rashford. Those 4 that I mentioned are a bit of a problem, and it's quite tempting to make that move now. But am I really going to do that before Nottingham Forest at home for United and Fulham at home for Arsenal? I just don't think it's worth it. I can just see myself doing that and really kicking myself on the weekend. So I am going to stick, and it basically means I'll have 2 free transfers next week where I can perhaps bring in a Sanchez, bit of a luxury move, Sanchez for Chelsea, and then maybe do Foden. You know, I think it's super important to remember that you get another week's worth of data if you hold. You know, we don't know who's going to get injured on the weekend. Anything could happen.
Well, clearly there's a lot left to be decided before the transfer deadline ends. What are you going for? Are you bringing in Foden? Are you bringing in Jackson? Are you rolling? Let us know in the comments below, and tune in later this week for our teams leading into Game Week 3. See you next time on Wildcard FPL.
Peace.
Peace.